The Mustang died at the bottom of the hill, which is how Derek Vance later explained to the deposition recorder that he ended up in a ditch in Centralvania watching something eat Larry Birch from the inside out. He wasn't supposed to be there. Neither was Bennett. The two of them had been hired to do a land survey on a parcel outside of Millbrook. 4 days of work, decent pay, and a chance for Bennett to get out of the city before his divorce was finalized. They'd taken Derek's '89 Mustang because Bennett's Civic had a check engine light that had been on since 2019, and neither of them wanted to think too hard about what that meant. The Mustang was fine. The Mustang was always fine until it wasn't. The engine made a sound like a man clearing his throat before bad news, and then simply stopped, coasting them onto a gravel shoulder somewhere between Millbrook proper and the access road they needed. Derek sat there for a moment with both hands on the wheel, listening to the tick of the cooling metal and the August insects going about their business. "Well," Bennett said. "Yeah, so don't." Bennett looked out his window at the tree line. The trees were the kind of green that's almost too green, the color of a place that doesn't get enough foot traffic, old and dense and indifferent. "We got signal?" Derek checked his phone. One bar, then none, then one again, like it was taunting him. "Sure, kinda. I'll call AAA. Takes 3 hours out here, then I'll call a tow. Same problem." Bennett pulled at his seatbelt and looked at the sky the way people do when they're calculating how much daylight they have left. "We walking?" "We're walking." They grabbed their survey gear and their bags and left the Mustang on the shoulder with the hazards going, which felt optimistic in retrospect. The access road was supposed to be half a mile up. It turned out to be closer to 2, which was fine except for the smell that started about halfway there. Something between copper and the inside of an old freezer. A smell that sat in the back of the throat and didn't leave. "Animal," Derek said. "Yeah," Bennett said, and neither of them looked too hard at the deer they passed 20 feet off the road, or what was left of it. The farmhouse they found was not on any of their survey maps. It was a real farmhouse, clapboard siding gone gray, a porch with 2 rocking chairs, a rusted mailbox at the end of a dirt driveway. The kind of place that looked like someone had lived there for 60 years, and then one day simply decided not to anymore. Derek had seen plenty of abandoned properties in his line of work. This one felt different. Too tidy. Chairs weren't weathered into collapse. They were just empty. The mailbox flag was up. "Someone lives here," Bennett said. "Maybe. We should ask to use the phone." The smell was stronger here. That freezer copper smell, with something else underneath it, something sweet and wrong, like meat that's been left in the sun. "Let's just find the access road," Derek said. They found Harlan Pruitt instead. He was on his porch with a shotgun across his knees, and his eyes fixed on the tree line across the road, and his color was not good. Harlan was in his 60s, a big man going soft at the edges, the kind of man who'd spent 40 years doing something physical and was now spending retirement pretending he hadn't. He looked at Derek and Bennett the way you look at a car that's pulled up to the wrong address at the wrong time of night. "You boys lost," he said, but his eyes didn't leave the tree line when he said it. "Broke down up the road," Derek said. "We're surveyors, working the Callahan parcel." "We were hoping. Get inside," Harlan said. "Right now, just get inside the house." The way he said it was not the way a man says it when he's being hospitable. It was the way a man says it when he knows something you don't, and the knowing of it has changed the shape of the afternoon. They got inside. The house smelled like coffee and gunpowder. Harlan had the windows covered with bed sheets, not blocked, just filtered, the August light coming through cotton in a pale, muted way that made everything look like a photograph of itself. There was a police scanner on the kitchen table, muttering static and occasional numbers. There was a cell phone with a cracked screen showing no signal. There was a landline phone whose cord had been unplugged, though Derek didn't notice that until later and then spent a long time thinking about why. "How many you see?" Harlan asked, setting the shotgun against the wall by the door. "See?" Bennett said. "Coming up the road, through the fields, anywhere." Derek and Bennett looked at each other. We didn't see anything, Derek said. We saw a dead deer. A doe, maybe. Harlan sat down at his kitchen table and put his face in his hands for a moment. Then he looked up, and when he did, his eyes were clearer, like something had been decided. They've been here 3 days, he said. I know how that sounds. Who has? Bennett asked. Things. Creatures. I don't know what you'd call them. He looked at the covered windows. They're small. The size of a dog, maybe. But they move different. Low to the ground real fast when they want to be. Slow when they don't think you can see them. They spit something, like acid. Gets in your eyes, you're done. The scanner muttered. A number, a county code Derek didn't recognize. I called 911 the first morning, Harlan said. Deister stayed on with me for 40 minutes. Then the call dropped. I haven't been able to raise anyone since. Neighbor down the road. He stopped. His jaw tightened. Larry Birch. He came over yesterday afternoon. He wasn't right. I sent him home. I don't think he made it. That was the man Derek and Bennett had not looked too hard at in the ditch 20 feet off the road. We need to get out of here, Bennett said. Our car's dead, but we can walk, we can flag down. Tried that first night, Harlan said. One of them is out there, between here and town, sitting on the road like it's waiting. I've seen it from the upstairs window, just sitting there in the dark. He looked at the shotgun. I hit it twice. It doesn't seem to care much. The August light shifted through the bedsheets. The scanner muttered. Outside, the insects kept going about their business. Okay, Derek said. Bennett looked at him. Okay, I need to think. Derek sat down at the table across from Harlan. He pulled his soda bag onto his lap and started going through it. Not because he expected to find anything useful, but because the act of looking at known things in a known way was the only thing that felt like solid ground right now. Transit, stakes, flagging tape, 2 cans of spray paint orange, the surveyor's universal language for here, a utility knife, a measuring tape, his lunch, which seemed absurd, a flashlight with fresh batteries that he'd put in just that morning out of habit. Tell me about them, Derek said. Everything you've seen. Harlan talked for 20 minutes. He was a precise man, a farmer's precision, concrete and unsentimental. The creatures were small, somewhere between a beagle and a German shepherd, but wrong in their proportions, too much leg at the back, not enough at the front, like something designed by something that had only ever read a description of an animal without seeing one. Their skin was the color of a new bruise. They had no visible eyes, or none that caught light the way eyes should, but they tracked movement with their whole bodies, orienting like compass needles. The spit, the acid, came in short bursts, a spray, when they were cornered or excited. It had taken off the paint on his truck door. They fed by. Harlan stopped here and said he'd rather not say exactly. But they fed. They're scouting, Derek said when Harlan had finished. What? The way you're describing them. Staying at the edges. Testing. Moving at night, mostly. That's not a pack feeding. That's reconnaissance. He didn't know why he was certain about this. He wasn't a biologist or a soldier or anything that would have given him standing to be certain about it. He just was. They're figuring out what we are. They've been figuring for 3 days, Bennett said. When do they stop figuring and start? Tonight, maybe, Harlan said quietly. Then we need to not be here when they do, Derek said. I told you. There's one on the road, one we know about, one you've seen. From an upstairs window in the dark. Derek looked at the spray paint cans in his bag, at the flashlight, at the utility knife. His eyes traveled to Harlan's kitchen, the gas range, the cabinet above it where a man like Harlan would keep, yes, 2 cans of WD-40 and a lighter fluid bottle that was mostly full. You have a torch? Derek asked. I have a propane torch workshop. How about just a lighter, a match? In the drawer. Get them, Derek said. He stood up. And I need your WD-40. Bennett was looking at him with an expression somewhere between alarm and the reluctant recognition that someone was taking charge. Derek, tell me you have an actual plan and not a Derek plan. What's a Derek plan? A plan that makes sense in your head and is insane everywhere else. Yeah, probably that, Derek said. But here's the thing, Bennett. Here's the actual thing. We walked 2 miles down that road and we didn't get eaten. You know what that tells me? That we're lucky, that they haven't made a decision yet. They're still watching, which means right now we're not prey, we're data. He zipped his bag shut. So we go out there before they decide. The plan was simple in the way that all plans are simple before they meet the world. Derek would take the front. He had the WD-40 and the lighter, which together would make a serviceable short-range torch. Not for long. The nozzle would give maybe 10 seconds of sustained flame before it got too hot to hold, but 10 seconds was 10 seconds. Harlan would come behind with the shotgun. Bennett, who had no weapons and whom Derek had privately assessed as being approximately 2% calmer than full panic, would carry the survey flashlight and the 2 cans of orange spray paint, which were the loudest, most attention-getting objects Derek had. Noise, Derek told him. If one of them gets close, you spray it in the face and you scream. Not a scared scream, a mad one, like you're the dangerous thing. I am not a dangerous thing. They don't know that. This was the bet. This was the whole bet, articulated in 2 sentences, that something hunting by behavioral recognition, something that had been watching humans for 3 days and drawing conclusions, might not have finished drawing them yet. That the right display at the right moment might land in some classification system. That wasn't predator-prey but something else. Something that required more calculation, more time, more caution. It was not a good bet. Derek knew it was not a good bet. He made it anyway, because the alternative was sitting in a farmhouse with bedsheets on the windows until the things outside finished their reconnaissance. The porch was the longest 20 feet Derek had ever covered. The road was empty. Dusk settling, the sky going the color of an old bruise, the same color, he noticed, as the things Harlan had described. The tree line was a dark mass to the west. The insects had stopped. That was when he knew one was close. He heard it before he saw it. A shift in the gravel, something deliberate. The sound of something that was capable of silence choosing not to bother with it. He turned the flashlight left along the road, and there it was, 15 feet away, crouched on the shoulder the way Harlan had said, low and patient, its whole body oriented toward them, like a compass needle. It was worse than he'd expected, which he'd expected. No eyes he could find. That was the worst part. The face that wasn't quite a face. The wrongness of a head that sensed without the apparatus of sensing that he understood. It was wet-looking, the skin too smooth, and even as he watched it, it was utterly still in a way that living things aren't usually still, the stillness of something that had decided it could afford to wait. It was not waiting, it lunged, not at Derek. At Bennett, who was the outermost, the easiest line, and the creature knew geometry even if it didn't have eyes. Derek threw himself sideways, got the lighter to the WD-40 nozzle, and then there was fire. A cone of it, ugly and orange and immediate, and the creature made a sound that was not a scream, but was the biological relative of one, high and tearing, and pulled back. It didn't run. That was the thing. It pulled back 6 feet and stopped and turned its featureless face toward Derek and reassessed. "Get behind me," Derek said to no one in particular. Harlan was there, the shotgun already up. Bennett had the spray can raised like he was going to repaint a fence. The creature moved sideways, circling, trying to find an angle. "It's thinking," Harlan said. "Good," Derek said. "That means it can be wrong." He took a step toward it. This was the part that he would not be able to explain adequately later, not to the deposition recorder, not to his brother, not to anyone. Not because it was complicated, but because it was entirely instinct, something deep and evolutionary, and approximately 100,000 years old, that said when the thing that wants to eat you is thinking, you don't hold still and let it think. You interrupt. He stepped toward it. He brought the WD-40 up and sprayed a short burst of flame in its direction. Not hitting it, just close, just in its space, and he yelled. Not a scared sound. Something lower, something that started in the chest and came out as territory, as presence, as I am not the right decision for you tonight. The creature stopped circling. It sat there on the road in the dusk, new bruised skin, catching the last light. And for a moment, Derek thought it was going to lunge again, and that was going to be the end of the plan, and maybe the end of everything. He held the lighter steady. The fluid can was getting warm in his grip. The creature made a sound, not the tearing sound from before, something smaller, something that traveled down into a register he felt in his back teeth rather than heard. And then it moved, not at them, away, back into the field on the left, into the tall grass, fast and low and deliberate, and then gone. The insect started up again. "Okay," Bennett said, in a voice that was almost normal. "What just happened?" "We failed to be prey," Derek said. "They moved. Down the road, fast, not running, because running was the wrong signal, but the walk of people who had somewhere to be and weren't particularly industrious about who knew it. Harlan between them, the flashlight cutting a hard white line ahead, the spray paint cans rattling in Bennett's bag. They saw two more. The first was in the ditch on the right, 40 yards ahead. Just a shape, just the orientation of something that watched. And Derek swung the flashlight onto it and walked straight at it, and it slid back into the dark without waiting to find out more. The second was on the roof of an outbuilding they passed, and that one watched them all the way to the bend in the road, and Derek watched it back, and neither of them made a move. He would think about that one a lot afterward. The one that watched. He tried to figure out what it had been doing up there, whether it had been part of a larger pattern, a coordinated thing, or whether it had just been one creature making its own calculations. He never landed on an answer he trusted. The honest answer was that he didn't know what they were, or how they worked, or whether the whole thing was coordinated or chaotic, and maybe that was fine. Maybe knowing wasn't the point. The point was the road, the point was the walk. The point was that you kept moving. They came out on the main road at 8:47 in the evening, by Derek's watch. A pickup truck found them 20 minutes later. A farm family heading into Millbrook, 3 kids in the back seat who stared at the 3 dirty, strange-smelling men their father had pulled over for. Derek rode in the truck bed and watched the road behind them the whole way in. Nothing followed. Millbrook was intact. Millbrook was alive and lit up and smelling like a diner and a gas station and a county fair 2 towns over. There were people on the sidewalks, a teenager on a bike, a woman with a dog, a yellow lab, who pulled at his leash toward a smell the woman couldn't identify. Harlan used the diner's landline to call his daughter in Pittsburgh. Derek used the payphone outside, an actual payphone, one of the last in the county, which felt like the universe's idea of a joke, to call 911 and then to call the state police and then to call a number Bennett found on his phone for something called the National Emergency Coordination Center, which turned out to be real. The things they were told, the things that happened in the weeks after, are not part of this story. This story is about the road, the 3 of them on it, the walk from the farmhouse to the main road in August dark, with a lighter and a can of WD-40 and a surveyor's flashlight and 2 cans of orange spray paint, and the bet Derek made that the right signal sent at the right moment to the right nervous system would land as something other than easy. He won that bet. He wouldn't say he was sure he'd win it when he made it. He'd be lying if he said that. He was afraid every second of that walk, afraid in the specific, clear-eyed way that isn't panic, but is just the honest assessment of a situation that might kill you. And he'd kept walking anyway, because the other option was to wait in the farmhouse for the assessment to be made for him. That's the thing nobody tells you about surviving. It's not about being fearless. It's not about being tough or specially equipped, or having the right background or the right training. It's about the very small, very human act of refusing to be categorized as helpless before the categorization is finished. 3 days the things had been there. 3 days of watching, measuring, testing, building a picture of what the humans were. Derek had walked out into that picture and painted something else. He sat in the diner in Millbrook and drank the worst coffee he'd ever had in his life and thought about the creature on the road. The one that had lunged and then pulled back, that had sat in the dusk looking at him with no eyes and been, he was almost sure of it, uncertain. He thought about the moment of uncertainty, the small gap of it. You could fit a lot in a gap like that if you were willing to step into it. Bennett was across the table, eating an enormous slice of pie, because that was who Bennett was. He'd walked 2 miles in the dark, past things that wanted to eat him, and the first thing he'd done inside a lit building was order pie. He caught Derek looking and shrugged. "I'm stress eating," he said. "Leave me alone. How's the pie? Incredible. You want some?" "Yeah." "You can't have any. You made me carry the spray paint." Harlan, across from them, was on his 3rd cup of coffee and staring at the table and occasionally glancing at his cell phone, which still showed no signal. He'd said almost nothing since the road. He'd shot things in his life: deer, groundhogs, once a rabid dog that had wandered onto his property, and Derek suspected the gap between those things and the thing on the shoulder of the county road was more than he was ready to close tonight. "You can stay in Millbrook tonight," Derek said. "Diner woman said the motel's got rooms." "We'll all go in the morning," Harlan said. "Somewhere that isn't there, for now. Just for now." Harlan looked up. He had the eyes of a man who'd spent his whole life on a piece of land and had the kind of relationship to it that city people describe in poetry and country. People just live without discussing. Leaving it wasn't a preference. It was an amputation. "It's my land," Harlan said. "I know. My father built that house. I know. I'm not leaving it." "Okay," Derek said, because it was true and because there was nothing useful to say after it that Harlan hadn't already weighed. They sat in the light of the diner. The coffee was terrible. The pie was apparently incredible. The teenager on the bike circled the block outside for reasons that were entirely his own. The yellow lab 3 tables away put his head on his paws and sighed. Outside, the August dark sat on Millbrook the way it always had. Comfortable, familiar, the dark of fireflies and screen doors and distant highway noise. Not the dark of the road. Not the dark of something crouched on a shoulder with its body aimed at you like a question you hadn't asked to answer. But Derek thought about that dark on the drive back the next morning. He thought about it a lot in the months that followed, when the news was what it was, the official statements were what they were, and everyone was saying one of 2 things: that humanity had been lucky, or that humanity had been caught off guard and would need to be better prepared next time. He didn't think either of those framings were right. What he thought, and what he never quite said publicly, because he wasn't the kind of person who said things publicly, was that the thing on the road had been correct to reassess. It had encountered something it hadn't expected and made the only reasonable decision, which was to acquire more information before committing. The mistake it made, if you could call it a mistake, if the categories applied, was in thinking that more time would resolve the uncertainty, that if it just watched long enough, it would understand what kind of thing a human was. It wouldn't have. That was the thing. That was the actual thing. You could watch humans for 1,000 years, and the one you were watching might be someone who stayed in the farmhouse, and the next one might be someone who walked out onto the road with a can of WD-40 and made himself the dangerous element. You couldn't build a reliable picture. The sample size would always be insufficient, the behavior too contingent, too dependent on variables that weren't biological, the specific mourning, the specific fear, the specific stubborn and unreasonable refusal to accept that the assessment was over. That was what the creatures on the road had encountered. Not a species that was strong, not a species that was numerous or well-equipped, a species that didn't finish being categorized, a species that kept revising the data. Derek Vance, land surveyor, drove back into Millbrook on a Tuesday morning in August and filed a report that 12 separate agencies called incomplete, and 3 called the most useful field assessment they'd received in the initial 72 hours. The report was 11 pages. The last paragraph read, "They were trying to understand us. I don't think they finished. I think that was the mistake." He thought about adding more. He thought about the walk, the road, the dark, the fire, the creature pulling back. He thought about the gap in its certainty and what he'd put into it. He left the paragraph where it was. Some things you put in the report. Some things you carry home and set down somewhere quiet and leave there. In the category of things you survived by being exactly the inconvenient animal that you are. afraid and inventive, and too stubborn to hold still long enough for anything to decide what to do with you. Bennett called him 3 weeks later to say his divorce had been finalized and he was thinking of going back to finish the survey if Derek was interested. Derek said sure. He got the Mustang fixed first,